Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Cole. It's Thursday evening, May 18th. We're going to call this video 1A for the 7-week summer term of 2023. Everyone, this second video per week is a sort of an experiment I'm conducting here in the summer term to try to communicate with everyone via these videos twice a week rather than once. I'm getting this out late. Many of you are not going to see it till Friday, I imagine. I'd intended to get it out 24 hours earlier or so. We'll try to do that in the future, but it's a new thing and it slipped my mind. Anyway, the purpose of these midweek videos is going to be simply to discuss things that are going on in the political system. And I'd like to touch on 3 things this week. First of all, the presidential election. Everybody, there's a lot of talk flying around that the public doesn't want really to see a Trump versus Biden rematch. But nevertheless, that may be very well may be what we're going to see. As of right now, it appears that may be the case. Everybody, the last time around, or going back even 8 years ago, by August 2015, we were having presidential debates. So on that schedule, we are 90 days away from having one. And there very well may be debates, but there are not very many announced candidates right now. Former President Trump announced, and just a week or two ago, President Biden officially announced. There are a handful of other people who have announced, but they are considered to be minor candidates. Any number of other potential candidates have been discussed in the press and may run. Most notably, Florida Governor DeSantis on the Republican side, and the recent reports are that he is a few days away from announcing his candidacy as I'm speaking to you. The remark has been made in the press that the next president is almost certainly going to be either Trump, DeSantis, Biden, or Vice President Kamala Harris. Trump and Biden have pretty much preempted the field in their respective parties. Other candidates are hesitant to run, except perhaps for DeSantis and a handful of others. Trump and Biden both are much older than presidents in the past have been. Biden is going to be our oldest president. I believe he is already. And next in line would be Trump. Trump is 3 years or so younger than Biden is. There's tremendous concern in some circles that Biden really is too old to run for re-election, and therefore he ought to consider dropping out. But for the time being, he seems to be proceeding full speed ahead. If he were to decline to run, he's already announced he could drop out. Okay. Then the heir apparent would be Vice President Kamala Harris. But Vice President Harris has her detractors. There are those who say she hasn't performed especially well as Vice President and would not be a strong candidate. Okay. The problem is, if Biden were to decline to run, and then Harris were dropped from the ticket and were not affirmed as the successor candidate, that would be an affront to many of the constituent groups within the Democratic Party, because Vice President Harris, of course, is a woman of color. Why then is she being singled out to be dropped from the ticket, whereas otherwise she would be considered the heir apparent, were Biden to drop out? There's pressure on Biden to go ahead and run, and he has announced his candidacy as of a few days ago, a couple of weeks ago, because by not having him run, the Democrats would give up the advantage of incumbency. To be the incumbent is better than being the challenger. It affords an advantage. It may not be as much of an advantage this time around as it might have been in the past, but it does confer an advantage on the incumbent president running for re-election. So, as it now stands, the speculation is that it's going to be Trump against Biden once again. Trump has got somewhat more opposition than Biden, especially if DeSantis runs. Public opinion polls show Trump pretty far ahead. But it's only 2023. Votes won't be cast in the primaries until early 2024. And as this procedure goes along, everybody, it becomes very volatile and unexpected things happen. Okay, so right now, Trump and Biden appear to be shoe-ins for the nominations of their respective parties, but we can't be 100% sure that that will be the case. We don't know who else, if anybody, is going to run. We don't know what future events are going to be. So we perhaps should keep our fingers crossed if we're hesitant about Trump and or Biden. Maybe not jump to the conclusion that those two are going to be the candidates run against each other in November 2024, although it appears for the moment that may be the case. A second thing that's going on, everybody, negotiations are continuing over raising the debt limit. And some of the readings that you have done, especially the interview with Congressman Green from Georgia, mentioned in passing the issue of the debt limit. By statute, Congress has limited the amount of debt the United States may run up. This goes back to 1939. Of course, periodically we keep having to raise the debt limit, and Congress will do this by statute. But on the Republican side especially, people are getting uneasy about the sheer amount of debt that has been accumulated. And now Republicans in Congress are attempting to use the impending debt limit as leverage to get the president to cut spending or do some other things that they want to do. It's unclear exactly when the government will run out of money and need to borrow more and have the debt limit raised. The Secretary of the Treasury has said it may be as early as the 1st of the month, the 1st of June, or sometime during that month. So there's pressure on these people to negotiate a deal. President Biden initially had said that he would demand a clean increase in the debt limit from Congress without any other matters being attached to it. Anything else would be giving in to blackmail. But he said a few weeks ago, but now they are talking. The latest news reports indicate that one thing the Republicans are going to ask for is work requirements for certain social welfare programs as a condition of raising the debt limit. Within the past day or two, there's been more optimism that a limit will be reached. The Speaker of the House, who is the president's main adversary in this matter, has made some noises to the effect that he's more optimistic now that an agreement will be reached. What if there is no agreement? Well, that raises the possibility that the United States would go into default. See, to finance the deficit, the United States sells securities, treasury bonds, and promises to pay people interest on the bonds. Those are regarded as about the safest investment you can buy because they are guaranteed by the full faith and credit of the United States. But if the government goes into default, does not have the authority to raise more money to pay that interest, then the full faith and credit of the United States might be called into question. And the effect of that on commodity prices, asset prices, the stock market is unknown, but it's feared it might be catastrophic. So there is tremendous pressure on these people to go ahead and negotiate an agreement to raise the debt limit. But on the other hand, there's pressure from the Republican side to require certain conditions to be met before they'll come to any agreement. So we'll just have to watch carefully as to see how that will be resolved in days to come. The latest news reports indicate that they are somewhat closer to resolving it. Investment advisors, by and large, are assuming and telling their clients that the politicians will engage in some brigsmanship, but at the very last minute, if necessary, it's being assumed they will come to an agreement because it's assumed that the consequences otherwise would be just too awful. Whether that will remain to be the case or not, we'll see. Some people on the Republican side, including Trump, have made noises, we might as well go ahead and default. The debt's so high, we'll eventually go into default anyway. Now, that in and of itself can be regarded as a sort of gamesmanship and brigsmanship, perhaps. But for the past day or so, there's been a bit more optimism that a agreement will be reached, and the financial markets have reacted to that. The other thing that's going on, everybody, regards the Supreme Court and Justice Clarence Thomas. Now, we're not going to get to the Supreme Court until later in the term. There's been tremendous acrimony since the Trump administration surrounding the Supreme Court. Okay. It's been speculated that one reason Trump got elected is down to promises that he made about who he would appoint to the Supreme Court. Conservatives for decades have felt that going back to the 1950s, 60s, and 70s especially the Roe versus Wade decision, the Supreme Court made any number of decisions that really had no warrant in the Constitution, they insist. And so, Republican presidential candidates, including Trump and his predecessors, have promised to nominate conservative jurists to the Supreme Court, although they might not have used exactly that wording. It was felt that strong-arm tactics were used to get, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett onto the Supreme Court, Trump's three appointees. When Justice Antonin Scalia died, Obama was still in office. He nominated Merrick Garland, who's now the Attorney General for the Biden administration, to serve on the Supreme Court. But Republicans in the Senate would not consider the nomination, and it was not filled until the 2016 election was over, and Trump, once he took office, appointed Neil Gorsuch. Then Justice Anthony Kennedy resigned during Trump's presidency. Brett Kavanaugh was appointed, and he was confirmed despite sensational allegations about his behavior and charges that he had engaged in sexual harassment. Then, as the 2020 election was approaching, just a few weeks before Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, and just a month or two before the election, Trump nominated Amy Coney Barrett, and she was confirmed. Okay. Whereas they had put off considering the nomination of Merrick Garland, they, in some people's estimation, rushed Amy Coney Barrett onto the court. But they will offer justifications for what they did in all these cases. And we can, whatever else we can say that they were doing what they perceived their constituents demanded of them, because control of the Supreme Court is such a high-stakes matter. What has come out in the past few weeks, everybody, is that Justice Clarence Thomas, who goes back to the first President Bush, he joined the Supreme Court in the early 1990s, is regarded as perhaps the most conservative individual in the Supreme Court, has a wealthy benefactor. The benefactor is Harlan Crow, an investor, wealthy real estate tycoon, if you will, and contributor to Republican Party causes, who has purchased for Clarence Thomas, among other things, any number of luxurious vacations. Well, this has raised eyebrows. The problem with it is it's hard to ascertain exactly what, if anything, Clarence Thomas might have done wrong. It's not clear that Harlan Crow had any direct business before the Supreme Court. And, furthermore, the Supreme Court itself has no code of ethics that would have prohibited somebody from taking that kind of money to avoid the appearance of impropriety. It nevertheless has raised eyebrows. It's raised eyebrows among Democrats, and Republicans have responded by insisting that it amounts to nothing but an attempt to strong-arm the Supreme Court. But it's something you may have heard about and can expect to hear perhaps a bit more about in the weeks and months to come. All right, so those are three things I thought worth commenting on. So we'll try to get this out in the middle of the week. We'll get our regular commentary out, talking about the course content over the weekend, so look for that Monday. And we're going to try to get this announcement out every Wednesday evening, so it'll be out for you to look at on Thursday morning. But this week, many of you will not be seeing this until Friday. So watch for another message for me Monday morning. We've got a discussion going Monday and Tuesday the 22nd and 23rd with an exam coming up Friday the 26th. So we'll be talking to you more about all that over the weekend in the announcement that you'll see Monday. But I hope all this has answered questions for you about things you might have been seeing or hearing about in the mass media. We want to try to continue to do this the middle of the week, every week for the rest of the summer term. So we'll be talking to you again in a few days. In the meantime, study hard, take it easy, and we'll see you a few days from now.